Welcome back to our channel where we share updates and untold stories about Catherine, Princess of Wales and her royal family. Today we bring you some news. Prince Philip's last decision, why he kept Andrew away from Wood Farm. In the latter years of his life, Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, moved away from the public eye and lived in relative isolation at Wood Farm on the Sandringham estate. The public framing of this choice and age-appropriate retreat after decades of public duty was correct as far as it went. But it did not by itself explain the underlying personal logic that determined his retirement. Philip's choice to spend his last years in a simple farmhouse, instead of in the ceremonial center of the monarchy, must be seen in light of a lifetime of decisions and habits, a temperament shaped by an unstable childhood, a professional identity built and strengthened in the Royal Navy, a marriage that balanced closeness with a strong respect for personal space, and a consistent preference for practical competence, order, and privacy. When you look at it that way, his decision not to live with his second son, Prince Andrew, during the time when Andrew's reputation was under a lot of scrutiny, seems less like a single mistake or important moment and more like a repeat of patterns that had been in Philip's life for decades. To comprehend the influences that affected Philip's later decisions, it is essential to reflect on the first aspects of his most significant partnership, his marriage to Queen Elizabeth II. Their relationship was characterized from its inception by a combination of personal affection and collective duty. In 1934, during the wedding of Princess Marina of Greece and Denmark to the Duke of Kent, a self-contained 13-year-old Navy cadet and a bashful 8-year-old princess briefly crossed paths. This is a common way to tell the story of their first meeting. The encounter itself was not very interesting, but it made a family imprint. It was like a little tile that, over time, helped form a mosaic of subsequent closeness. 5 years later, in 1939, they had a more important meeting at Dartmouth Naval College. There, an epidemic of mumps and chickenpox among the cadets left just one healthy person to take care of visiting royal princesses Prince Philip, who was then 18. His assured comfort in that setting, shown in his athleticism and in his lively, uncomplicated chat with the 13-year-old Elizabeth, made an effect that would linger even after the war. What started as a spark of mutual interest developed into a long-lasting communication throughout the chaos of World War II. While Philip was on active naval duty and Elizabeth was doing her royal and wartime duties at home, they wrote letters to each other. Over time, these letters became places where they could share private advice, love, and a steady connection during years of enforced separation. Philip asked in 1946. The engagement, which was announced in 1947, and the wedding at Westminster Abbey on November 20th, 1947, were big news all around the country. The marriage gave people in Britain who were still rationing and recuperating a feeling of continuity and the chance to start afresh. But the public signal did not make up for the private losses that the marriage brought. Philip made real and terrible sacrifices in his own life to take on the role that the union needed him to play. He gave up his Greek and Danish royal titles, gave up any claim to the Greek throne, became a British citizen, and acquired the name Mountbatten, which is an English version of his mother's last name. King George VI handed him the dukedom of Edinburgh the night before the wedding. This gave him the official title that would stay with him for the rest of his life. But these distinctions came at the cost of a former identity that had been formed in the Royal Navy's strict structure and ethos of meritocracy. Philip's time in the Navy was more than just a job. It was a way of life. He became a commander, and like many other naval officers, he thought that the real duties chain of command and real achievements that came with serving at sea would help him assess himself. Philip's active naval career came to an end on February 6, 1952, when Elizabeth became queen when King George VI died. The replacement of the measured practical life of a ship's officer with the ceremonial confining environment of the consort's duty was not only a job shift, it represented a significant alteration in the circumstances governing his agency and identity. The consort's power comes from the Constitution and ceremonial rules which limit what they can do. A Navy commander can make choices and see how they affect others, but a royal consort has to use influence patronage and the soft structure of public symbols to get things done. Philip has always been characterized by biographers, courtiers, and others who knew him well as a man of action. This means that he liked to be busy, solve problems in a practical way, and have clear lines of duty. He was very devoted to the Queen, and there was nothing in his actions that made it seem like he wanted to be famous for its own purpose. Still, losing his professional identity and having to live by the rules meant he had to come up with a new way to see his purpose. He did not, in fact, give up on being active. Instead, he built a life of purposeful participation that kept the parts of leadership and success that he valued: strict patronages, project-based interventions, and a private life that allowed him to be independent. Philip's desire to live a life of meaningful independence has roots in his upbringing and adolescence. Prince Philip of Greece and Denmark was born on June 10, 1921, on the Greek island of Corfu. His early years were marked by instability and being moved about. A revolt in Greece, 18 months after his birth, ended the monarchy and forced his family to leave the country. The tale of baby Philip hiding in a box to get out of the nation is a powerful one that has been told over and again in biographies and family stories. It shows more than just a brave gesture by his parents. It also shows how unstable his early existence was. That instability was not just a fun trip. Philip moved between families and nations, including France, Germany, and Britain, as a youngster. He did not have the constant presence of parents that many kids take for granted. His mother, Princess Alice of Battenberg, had bouts of severe mental illness and was sometimes put in a hospital. His connection with his father was strained since his father moved to the south of France. Philip was mostly raised by a network of relatives, including his maternal grandmother Victoria Mountbatten, Marchioness of Milford Haven, and Lord Louis Mountbatten. He learnt how to be flexible and independent, although he did not have a normal household all the time. The strict ideology and focus on character through hardship at Gordonstoun in Scotland were a good fit for him. Kurt Hahn's approaches, which included sailing, climbing, tough outdoor trips, and a strong sense of personal responsibility, had a big impact on me. Gordonstown's slogan, "Plus est en vous," "There is more in you," was meant to get young people to be leaders by putting them in tough circumstances and making them be inventive and self-disciplined. Philip liked the school's routine because it gave him structure where his early life had been broken up. It also reinforced attitudes like being independent, enjoying physical activity, and preferring tangible ways to assess success that would shape his later life. These early dislocations and the subsequent educational approach significantly influenced his mature personality. Philip's personality made him emotionally distant, fearful of relying on others and protective of his own areas where he could be in charge. His public rudeness, which included cutting humor, occasionally harsh comments, and a propensity to deflate pomposity, hid a more private existence. Workshops, pilots' cockpits, and carriage driving boxes were not just fun things to do. They were places where he could learn how to control his surroundings and show that he was good at what he did. To understand why a simple home on an estate in Norfolk became so important to him in later years, you need to know that he needed a private space to feel like he had control over his life. Philip became very good at turning his natural leadership skills and ability to solve problems into a position that fit the demands of the monarchy after he stopped being an active naval commander. He wanted to bring the monarchy up to date by utilizing his fame to draw attention to issues he thought were vital, such science, technology, industrial performance, and caring for the environment. His style was quite straightforward. He typically looked for concrete results, asked tough technical questions on the manufacturing floor, and supported projects that helped people learn new skills and become more resilient. The Duke of Edinburgh's award, which was one of his most well-known long-term projects, was based on both his own life story and his beliefs about education. The award, which started in 1956, set up an organized program for young people to improve themselves. They had to do things like volunteer for community service, go on trips, and learn new skills. The award was a practical way for him to show what he valued: small, focused challenges. the ability to rely on himself, and the idea that character is built through action, not words. Over the years, the program grew to include people from other countries and had a lot of soft power spreading ideas about civic duty and taking the initiative. It appealed to people from many walks of life because it had clear quantifiable levels of success, bronze, silver, and gold, and a system that rewarded hard work and skill. The award became a lasting part of Philip's public legacy because it showed that he valued real accomplishments above symbolic gestures. Philip's list of people he helped was long and frequently practical. During his public life, he accepted or started almost 800 patronages and presidencies, mostly for organizations that were related to his interest in scientific and technological excellence, such as engineering societies, research institutes, and industrial bodies. He was the first to use a method where the royal visit was not only a formality, but also included intellectual engagement. He would ask very specific questions about manufacturing methods, materials, and technological problems. This strategy showed real interest and, more crucially, gave some credit to talented professionals and researchers whose work was frequently not recognized in public life. He utilized his position to bring attention to the often unseen parts of national life, where actual innovation happened, the labs, workshops, and factories. He did this by emphasizing on craftsmanship, invention, and the sciences. Another thing that came up a lot was environmental issues. Philip was worried about the effects of pollution, species extinction, and using resources in an unsustainable way at a period when these topics were not yet popular in mainstream political discourse. He was an important part in the early growth of the World Wildlife Fund. He was the first president of the UK and subsequently the worldwide president. He utilized the organization to promote conservation based on scientific knowledge. He was not passionate about the environment. He was realistic and focused on results. He emphasized facts, quantifiable consequences, and practical steps to protect ecosystems and species. He understood before many other public personalities that growth in industry and technology could and should be balanced with taking care of natural resources. His actions showed that he believed in making decisions based on facts and taking organized action. In addition to these public activities, Philip worked on private ones that let him learn new skills and be alone. He trained to fly and got his pilot's wings in 1953, which showed that he wanted to master new skills and be able to travel around freely. When arthritis and age made it hard for him to play polo, which was a favorite sport of the royal family, he switched to carriage driving. This is a very difficult sport that requires focused skill and a close relationship with horses. In it, he could test his skills against outside conditions and get a real sense of control. He was an amateur painter who loved landscapes and had a strict afternoon schedule that included reading and writing. A well-stocked private library and workshops where he could work on tools and inventions were more than just fun. They were important outlets for the practical personality that had characterized him since he was a child. These activities were not just hobbies. They were ways for him to organize his life projects with clear goals systems to learn and puzzles to solve. Philip's answer to the main problem of being a consort was to have both public and private responsibilities that overlapped. This way, he could serve the crown while still being his own person. His solution focused on being productive, being quietly competent, and having privacy that was strictly limited. It needed a home life that allowed for both intimate ties with the Queen and the freedom to be alone when needed. That arrangement, living apart for a while, letting each other have their own routines, and having a shared but not too close partnership, was not a break but a practical solution that let the marriage last longer. The couple's household habits, such as keeping their personal routines distinct and allowing each other to have their own space, helped maintain a stable balance between their public duties and private demands. Philip said he was retiring from public responsibilities in August 2017 when he was 96 years old. He has done more than 22,000 solo engagements throughout his lifetime of service. Most people admired the public's response, which showed that they recognized an unusual and long-lasting commitment. For Philip, retirement was not so much the end of his mission as a chance to choose new priorities. He became more and more used to a life of regularity and quiet with Wood Farm at its center. Wood Farm is a 5-bedroom farmhouse hidden away on the Sandringham estate that is purposely small by royal standards. Philip liked it because it was neither a palace, a mansion with a rigid public profile, or a location where official hospitality took over ordinary life. Instead, it had very few formal staff, which gave it a more relaxed feel that he liked. He could wear casual clothes, eat simple meals, and get involved with household and estate matters, and it kept him out of the constant spotlight that surrounds the main royal residences. For someone who had spent decades maneuvering through the theater of state ritual, Wood Farm's normalcy was a resource. It provided a space where the minor rituals of everyday life, reading, drawing, and wandering the lanes of Norfolk, regained their importance over ceremonial duty. Friends, workers, and family members say that Philip was calm and at ease at Wood Farm. He frequently read by the fire painted or spoke to small groups of guests about technical topics instead of small chat about duty or position. He liked the day-to-day tasks of managing an estate, was interested in local issues, and appeared to really love the simple joys of peaceful country living, including the rhythm of meals, the peace of Norfolk roads, and the seclusion of a farmhouse. Being alone did not imply being alone. The Queen came by often, they spoke on the phone often, and their marriage remained quite close. But Wood Farm was a safe place for Philip to be himself, with as few rules as possible and as much personal dignity as possible. This retreat fit with a pattern that had been set in their home life for a long time. The Queen had to be in constitutional centers like the palace, and now Windsor Castle, because she was the head of state. It was known that the consort's job was to be supportive and flexible. The couple had been living in a precarious balance for a long time. They were close in love and advice, but they also gave each other space. These separations were not indications of alienation, but rather manifestations of a meticulously negotiated relationship, allowing each party to engage in complementary domains of activity. Wood Farm, however, should not be seen as an indication of a dysfunctional marriage, but rather as the culmination in advanced age of a long-standing practice that had benefited them for many years. Prince Andrew's problems came to light in the middle of this orderly retirement. The connection between the Duke of York and Jeffrey Epstein, who died in jail in August 2019 after being found guilty of sex offenses, caused a lot of public and legal attention. Virginia Giuffre, previously Virginia Roberts, said in 2019 that Epstein had trafficked her and forced her to have sex with Prince Andrew while she was a teenager. Prince Andrew has refuted these claims. His BBC Newsnight interview in November 2019, which was supposed to answer concerns regarding his connection with Epstein, was largely seen as a bad idea and did not work, leading to a lot of public anger. Within a few days, Buckingham Palace said that Prince Andrew would stop doing public duties for the foreseeable future. This event brought a level of negative attention to the Duke of York that was very different from the normal level of scrutiny that royal family members go through. There were several ramifications of the controversy that spread. It caused issues for the royal family in terms of reputation and logistics, as many questioned how things worked at the palace, the family's judgment, and the line between private life and public duties. For Prince Andrew, it meant legal problems and a big drop in his public duties. For other family members, the incident posed a moral and institutional quandary: how to maintain principles of accountability and dignity while safeguarding familial relationships and ensuring the continuity of the monarchy's operations. The monarchy's special susceptibility to public opinion in a media landscape, inundated with social media and incessant criticism, intensified what may have previously been a matter resolved only within private familial contexts. Philip's decision not to reside with Prince Andrew must be understood in this tense situation. If living together had been suggested, the difficulties would have gotten in the way of the very things Philip had built Wood Farm to defend. If the Duke of York had come to Wood Farm, or if he had moved from his lonely farmhouse to a residence closer to Windsor, where Andrew lived, There would have been constant intrusion from reporters, legal teams, cameras, and the public's comments. That idea was completely opposite to the way he was used to living his life, which was to keep things private and limit public exposure. Philip's answer was not the result of a single spiteful choice, but rather the result of a lifetime of habits, keeping his freedom, keeping things in order, and staying away from the public drama of dispute. He had frequently put the monarchy's dignity ahead of his own desires by giving up titles, giving up active leadership, and accepting the limits of royal life. But he had also looked for ways to feel in control and at ease within those limits. The controversy involving Prince Andrew may have spread the disease of public spectacle to those areas. Living with him in such conditions would have disrupted the tranquil routine and confined social milieu that had become integral to Philip's latter years. There is one more thing to think about. Philip generally dealt with issues by setting strict personal limits instead than making public statements or making dramatic gestures. He preferred to let actions' simple routines quietly maintained patronages and unobtrusive advice perform the job that words would otherwise try to achieve. His decades of methodical service and private stress on order imply that he would see the entry of a public scandal into his immediate home as a problem to be managed rather than tackled with great gestures. From that point of view, going back to Wood Farm and staying away from the center of the controversy was both a smart move and a sign of dignity. It was a way to protect the tiny area of life he could still control. If you just look at Philip's choice through the prism of familial distance, you will overlook the deeper connection it has to his life's work. Wood Farm was a place where he could live out the principles he had learned as a child: self-reliance, practical skills, and respect for private organized places. It also reminded him of the home he built for his marriage, a collaboration that allowed for distinct spaces' mutual dependence without being too close, and respect for the intimate rituals that kept them close. The choice not to live with Prince Andrew at a period of intense controversy was not a harsh criticism, but rather a restatement of a way of life that had worked for both Philip and the Queen for 70 years. It should also be highlighted that Philip's leaving did not mean he did not care about his family's grief. He was very devoted to his immediate family throughout his life. He could be stern in public and soft in private, which often made him seem rude in public and loving in private. His letters and taped comments to family members show that he took his family duties seriously, even when he would rather do them in secret. In this instance, the decision to distance himself from public dispute did not exclude the existence of complicated emotions for his kid. It was a type of self-protection tailored to both personal need and institutional factors. Philip's actions also make sense from an institutional point of view. The monarchy is in charge of both the family and the state, and every private choice may have public consequences. Philip had been very aware of how important it was to keep the monarchy's machinery running smoothly while he was the consort. In that light, his desire to keep Wood Farm as a peaceful place was not just selfishness. It was an effort to keep a public crisis from ruining a private refuge that was helping the Queen do her public duties while still having some peace at home. For a man whose job was to keep systems running smoothly, the idea of living in a house that could be the scene of intrusions and shows was horrible. When Philip died on April 9, 2021, at the age of 99, commentators correctly said that it was the end of an era. In many ways, his last years at Wood Farm were a continuation of the habits and values that had guided his public and private life: a devotion to the Queen and the Crown, a dedication to purposeful, outcome-oriented public service, a strong preference for order agency and practical achievement, and a constant need for a private space to live a life of modest routines. His withdrawal from the center of royal life was not indicative of failure or alienation, but rather the conclusion of a career spent balancing public duty with a persistent assertion of a domain he could unequivocally claim as his own. To assess Philip's decisions in his latter years is to acknowledge the consistency of an extensive character development. He learned how to live with both sacrifice and self-control through the instability of exile, the strictness of Gordonstown, the discipline of naval service, and the practicality of his patronages. Wood Farm was more than just a home. It was a symbol of that structure. Philip did what he had always done. He kept his private space safe from public scandal, no matter how close it came to family. He did this by refusing to let it happen, both practically and personally. He did this because he wanted to keep his dignity, his private order, and the small but important areas where he could still exercise control. When you look at his life as a whole, it seems more like a steady temperament than a collection of unrelated events. Whenever public duty or personal need required him to assume different roles, naval officer, royal consort, public patron, he endeavored to restructure his circumstances to align with a fundamental set of values, competence, utility, and the stewardship of the institutions he served. His decision to go to Wood Farm and his intent on maintaining that area free of the infectious chaos that surrounded his kid might be seen as the conclusion of a life spent creating and protecting a space for effective agency. In that way, the farmhouse was not really a getaway. It was the last step in a life plan to live with dignity based on the fields where one could still act and to safeguard those fields from the damaging effects of public controversy. Thank you for watching the video. Please let us know your thoughts and goodbye for the time being.